Hi, everyone. Um, Thanks for taking the time to join us today for All Access Fest, and thank you to Music Forward for all you do to bring these valuable topics and experiences for our audiences today. My name is Chadae Bowler, and I run my own independent music and event management company where I develop brand and experiential marketing strategies for artists and businesses. And I'm so excited to moderate today's panel, An Artist's Image, Fan Engagement, Live Shows, Merch, and More, because it's so important for artists to have their brand image in place in order to engage with fans, get more followers, and create revenue for themselves. I'm really excited to be joined with today's panelists. We have some really awesome key players that come from different aspects of the industry to talk about this really awesome topic. And I'm now excited to welcome Will, Blair, and Brooke to introduce themselves. And why don't you kick us off, Blair, and tell us who you are and what you do?
Perfect. Hello, I'm Blair Miller and I run Chaos Creators. It is a boutique entertainment marketing agency. So I do social media marketing for artists, influencers, and entertainment related brands. When it comes to artist marketing, I help artists from the ideation phase. So coming up with their brand, what they want to portray on social media, how they want their voice to come across, and then through the content creation process, helping them create content for social media or music videos or anything that goes with the rollout to the actual execution on social media. So, posting on social media, launching influencer campaigns, launching singles and album releases, pretty much anything online we help with.
Awesome. And I'm going to kick it over to you, Brooke.
Hi, I run music marketing and streaming at Riot Games, and you're probably wondering what that means since it is a gaming company, most famous for League of Legends. No, I don't play video games, but what I do is I take the music that is out in the world from different parts of the League of Legends or Valorant, different game IPs as it's called. It's really kind of looking at it as a media company, whether it be soundtracks or virtual artists, which takes a lot of artist branding in and of itself, and working with different artists to create music for the games. And prior to that, I worked at an independent label running pop marketing, and then was a manager before that. And then before that, worked in streaming at Spotify and YouTube.
Awesome, Brooke. All right. And Will, why don't you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, everybody. I'm William Tenney, and I've been in the music business forever, but most notably, I founded the New York City management records and services business called SunPop. We manage and look after a handful of major label and major independent artists alike. Worked with everyone from Miley Cyrus to Green Day, and I'm super passionate about talking about the music business. So excited to get into it with you guys.
Awesome. And each of your roles are really interesting in how it relates to your relationships with the artists and how you get their image and how you support them in the more public space. So why don't we actually kick off with the first question of what is branding? Like what is for an artist, and why is it important for them to think about branding in order to engage with their fans? Who wants to take that first?
I can start. I think branding is kind of a double-edged sword word because it is often associated with something that's very manufactured, and I think historically that's come from the label. But luckily, in today's day and age, with social media and the way that that kind of moves culture, I think artists have taken control of quote unquote their own branding. And so, what branding, at least to me, kind of means in building an artist repertoire and most importantly, building their fan base is authenticity and who they are and who they want, the foundation they want to build their fan base on and what those connection points are. And I think I'm sure that Will and Blair will agree with this, but when you work with an artist who has conviction over what that is from the jump, it makes our jobs a lot easier of being able to amplify that so that fans can resonate with it in the right way.
Awesome. I love what you said about authenticity. So that was something that I pulled out of your response there, because I think it is definitely something that is the underlying piece for branding, right? Like it's why we connect with these artists. So anyone else want to add to that? Like what is branding and why is it important?
Yeah, I think super succinctly for me, branding an artist brand is, I think of it as an umbrella, and everything that exists underneath that the artist puts in place to represent that, to represent them to the world, right? So we talk a lot about brand bullets and brand umbrella. I think about it as a literal umbrella and anything they want to put underneath. Buzzwords, colors, icons, images, aesthetics, tones, like literally anything we'll build. We can build brand bullets out of, and we use this like, virtual umbrella to make decisions and how we portray that artist to the world.
Awesome.
And hitting on your question about why is it important to have a brand, I think it's important because there's so much competition, especially with so much access to streaming and social media now. So having a cohesive and organic and authentic brand that fans and people on social media can see and know you and resonate with helps you stand out from all the competition that is out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Brooke.
I was going to say, kind of taking it back to the fans, that fandom is an extension of the brand and kind of falls within that umbrella, because if operated successfully, then the fans will feel like they're a part of your brand and community, and the community that's built around the artist. So making sure that it's strong and a point of connection for other people, I think is really important. Relatable.
Yeah, I think you all have touched on really awesome points that I wholeheartedly agree with. I think there's the actual marks that we use to recognize the artists, but then there's the authenticity. So making sure that it's a cohesive, recognizable brand. And then also, like, it's the storytelling, right? So a lot of times it's, especially in the social age where you might discover an artist or a song, it's the brand, it's the storytelling that really is what continues to grow the fandom. So, you know, in this day and age where music and the artist brand are kind of separated because you can interact with it in different ways, I do believe that like it's the branding that's important to keep that storyline cohesive, right? So thank you all for answering that question. That now that we've gone on, you've discussed what branding is. How can an artist use the brand marks? So whether it's the marks or if it's the storytelling aspects of it or this umbrella, how do they, once they finally figure out the brand, how can they use that to create revenue for themselves? Or like, how are they using that to build out ways that are going to get their fans to take an action? So think about tours or, when they're selling merch.
I mean, I would, you want to use it to guide your decision making, right? So, I mean, you mentioned how to drive revenue, right? So if an artist has a good understanding of their brand and their brand umbrella, it's honestly the sky's the limit. There's a world of opportunity that you can build around those brand bullets. I mean, are you incorporating those things into the merchandise and creating a world for fans to explore? Are you exploring partnership opportunities? That's a great way to drive revenue using your brand bullets. I mean, that's probably a big portion of, I think, what Brooke works on.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, in terms of monetizing, bring it back to that community aspect of like the extension of your brand. Obviously, at a much higher level, it is creating that kind of FOMO aspect of people wanting to prove that they were a part of the brand from the beginning, or at least a part of it in general, and being able to purchase, whether it be a vinyl, depending on the artist, obviously, a vinyl, a sweatshirt, even if it's some other sort of collectible, a ticket, and be at that live experience. It's kind of, the fans mark on that brand and that community. And so being able to extend what you paint is, and I think an artist brand also extends and differs very much based on what we call a campaign and what you're selling. And particularly in such like a single ecosystem where we're driving for the right playlist for a song to get heard by the right people. When you create a sticky fan base, as we call it, so people who really like stick around for the longevity of your career, it goes so much further beyond just a song being good and people liking a song. And I'm sure anyone who's ever, been a fan of anyone can experience that. You go check out their Instagram, you want to see them on tour, you understand the other type of people who listen to this artist and like them because other fans are basically connecting with and interacting with the brand. And so I think when you think of it that way and moving fans through that sort of conversion funnel of like awareness and listening to like really engaged and wanting to show that they're a part of it, that's where the monetization happens.
Anyone want to add to that? I love what you said, Brooke, about, well, you didn't say the word exactly, but what it sounds to me like you're describing is the fan journey, right? So thinking about how the fan is coming in and then how to continue to pull them in deeper, or to make sure, like you said, that sticky fan that's going to stay with you throughout the longevity of your career. So with that being said, though, because we are sort of in a more single focused era of music at the moment, what are some must-haves in the artist toolkit, right? And how are you, as in your respective roles or your teams, how are you supporting the artists in developing their brand toolkit? And Blair, since you have more on the social side of things, like, why don't you talk us through like what that's like for you and your team?
Definitely. So on the social side, the imaging is the biggest part of the branding that I touch. So making sure that you have up-to-date photos that can be used in press or for single art, making sure your visuals, whether it's a music video or a lyric video, tie back to the photos you're using to promote the single, trying to make it as cohesive as possible. And then when it comes down to social media, making sure that your voice is always staying on brand. So when it comes to captions, maybe thinking, what types of slang am I using in my captions? Which emojis am I using? What feels organic to me? Or what is something that someone completely different would be saying? Just making sure you understand how you're showing up on social media, and then making sure it's cohesive across all platforms. So, making sure that your TikTok profile picture is the same as your Instagram profile picture, and making sure it's just a cohesive brand. When people are looking at your website, everything ties together around the project or your brand.
And Will, like, working with artists in the management perspective and having the label, like, what are you looking at, or how do you actually, those are two different questions. So I'm going to go back to the original question of, when you're working with an artist and you're building their toolkit, how are you supporting them in that pursuit?
I don't know if there's one specific answer that I can give as to how we help develop that brand umbrella, other than like very, focused conversation. But we just, we look for artists and we want to help artists get the best understanding they can of their brand. And in today's market, it's more important now than ever. I mean, we have, every single day we wake up and somebody who was nobody yesterday because of Spotify and or TikTok becomes somebody tomorrow. And so it's important in those moments to have your brand figured out, so that you can capitalize on that traction. I mean, I'm sure Brooke and Blair have seen this. I'm sure everyone has seen this. Like, you have someone who is doing music sort of not so seriously, something pops off, and all of a sudden you have to have those things figured out, and you're not able to make good on that opportunity if you don't. So I don't know that I can answer your question with like a specific bullet point as to how we help an artist develop their brand bullets. I think ultimately it's something they probably have to really build for it to be authentic. We can do our best to help, but we look for artists that have a good understanding of who they are, and if they don't, we work on helping them get there, usually through focused conversation and development.
All right, so if you're not developing it, how are you helping to reinforce the brand then? Because it sounds like you're working with artists who kind of have a sure sense of themselves already. And so, and you mentioned this earlier, and it's a question that we'll get in, we can kind of get into it now, but the strategic partnerships, are you helping more on connecting the artists with these opportunities because their brand is already intact?
Sure. I mean, go ahead, Brooke, please.
I was going to say, I think it's both. I think there are a lot of brands who, and I mean businesses, where if they align with the artist brand, it's a good like awareness or monetization opportunity. And then there are different brands that would align with to kind of deepen and amplify the brand that the artist is building, and kind of more on the engagement side of it. You can. I kind of cut you off.
No, I wanted to hear what you had to say. That was it, period.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so that was more on the strategic partnership side. So what is strategic or brand partnerships, and how can they help further an artist's brand? So when you're looking at ways that you can connect the artist and bring them out further, does it depend? Like, can emerging artists still have brand partnerships, or do you have to be an established artist already?
Emerging artists can absolutely have brand partnerships. I mean,
Yeah.
they vary on different scales. I think the reality is a lot of times brand partnerships is, on the emerging side, is a form of investment. But I don't think any team would necessarily take that investment or endorsement from a brand that the artists themselves didn't feel was representative of who they are and their fan base. I've actually been in many instances of that where there wasn't really brand alignment, and so the investment, we would turn down the investment because it wasn't a brand fit, which I'm sure Blair and Will have dealt with many times as well on the label side.
Yeah,
It's super. I mean, it's super helpful from a revenue perspective for artists, to be honest, because not all the time, but a lot of times brand partnerships are happening with big businesses.
Right.
And just from like a pure GDP perspective, like most businesses are larger than the music business. Like we're a relatively small industry in terms of GDP. So certainly helpful from a revenue perspective. But to answer your earlier question, Chadae, brand partnerships are sort of open for artists of all sizes these days. Historically, they were sort of more fit for established or major label artists, mainly because established and major label artists were the only ones with sort of commercially viable recordings, like competitive recordings. But now, because the barrier to entry is so low and everyone makes their own records, artists of all sizes are doing brand partnership deals.
And on the emerging side, even if you're not at a level where you can get paid by the brand for the partnership, you can look for other opportunities with that partnership, whether it's something where you can give back and create some type of fan engagement campaign, or if they're collaborating on the post with you and you're tapping into their following. So there are great things that can be done on the emerging side too.
Absolutely. What are some key or some really interesting brand partnerships that with artists at the center that what are some of the most recognizable ones in recent memory for you? They could be ones that you've worked on, or they could be ones that just everyone, that drew a really big moment.
Oh gosh, I have so many. Brooke, do you have any? I'm sure Blair, you have any good ones?
I mean, there's a lot.
It's fun, right?
Yeah.
It's like fun when you're like out in the wild and you see like two brands overlap so well together. It like really sticks in your mind, I feel like.
Yeah. I loved, especially like when Doja Cat and Taco Bell got together, right? Like that was just something that I think it's an example that a lot of marketers use, because that it kind of happened out of nowhere. Like it was a brand and an artist that they took a moment and they were able to expand on it because, one, the artist had a pretty tight brand in place already, and then the partner that came in, they did their social listening. So I think a lot of the times too, the brand partnerships, it's not just the artist always pitching. It is like if you work for a brand, there's ways that you can do, like you can incorporate music or incorporate those relationships where you're just kind of seeing how, you know, an ambassador, like the artist can kind of become an ambassador for that brand. So I think those have been interesting. And I mean, another one that sticks out for me as an artist that always has their branding and brand partnerships in place is going to be Lil Nas X. And he brings that out into like all of his experiential pieces. But now that I've given you guys a little bit more time to think of some, like Blair, what's a really cool campaign that you've run recently?
One, it's not one that I ran, but one that I love is just the Barbie movie in general, and then how they've tied it to the music side with the Barbie movie album, and how, like you were saying, the actors and the artists kind of became ambassadors for the movie, and the pink and, you know, every aspect of the Barbie brand, it's everywhere. You can't miss that. So I really love how they've collaborated with so many different brands, and then also the actors and artists.
Yeah, I love the Barbie example too, just because of the fact that when I was thinking about soundtracks, who comes to mind? Nicki Minaj, right? So I love that it was you know, like someone who's so synonymous has always championed the Barbie theme even before Barbie Mattel itself was really boosting the brand. And then the way that they brought in a new artist, and Ice Spice, or like some of these other artists, the other artists that they brought into the soundtrack. So I think there's some really cool moments that we're going to continue to see as experiential and, you know, the virtual aspects come. And Brooke, that actually leads me to a really good question with you. Working on the gaming side of where music and gaming are coming together, and we're seeing that trend starting to increase. You're working with artists that, you know, are maybe AI developed, or you're using technology to help support virtual artists in that sense. Are you able to share a little bit about what that's like and how the teams are supporting or developing brands for these AI artists or virtual artists?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting shift from dealing with real artists and their real emotions all
Yeah.
of the time to then kind of applying the same experience and skill set, but to characters. I think that the League of Legends and Riot Games brand is extremely lucky that they built the type of fan base that they have. It's almost like working backwards in a fan conversion funnel. Usually you go from the wide end of reach and awareness, and like your end goal is that engagement because that's where you monetize. It's almost like we're going the opposite direction of the engagement is so there and the monetization is so there. But how do we scale this IP to impact beyond just the gaming world and into culture? And for a while, I think it was like 8 years ago, maybe, but the launch of KDA was characters from the games, female characters that were brought together to create a girl group, a girl band. And there are real artists behind them, like B. Miller, like Madison Beer, who, you know, were able to leverage their own fan bases and their own sound, but lend it to these kind of existing brands. And although the characters already existed, building the image and the really like the brand of this new band I wasn't at Riot for that, but I think it's a similar type of exercise of this fan base exists, and how do we really want them to connect with what would be like their favorite K-pop group in real life. And so I think it always starts, the biggest similarity is understanding the fan base, using real artists to create really great music that will resonate. But beyond that, it's having imagery, and the same to Will's point, there's like, when I think of KDA, before I even worked at Riot, I always thought of this like purple color that just was always in their branding, even though I barely knew anything about them before I started at the company. But that like purple is kind of like in my mind, and it makes me think of this kind of like girly but powerful group that they are. And I think even the logo that I think of now, and so even not knowing the characters and what they represent in the game as a music entity, their branding was really strong in a way where I kind of understood what the fan base was about and where they wanted to lean in and what they resonated with.
And that's what good branding should do, right? Like it shouldn't be a surprise. While we may not always think of it or connect those dots, I think when we see it, we're like, oh, that makes sense, right? Or there's like just certain things where you're like, okay, I know this artist or this brand for this, and I think that this could be a really good connection there. So I always say like good branding should make sense. Like it shouldn't be something where people like it shouldn't alienate a group, or if it is, that's probably part of your brand. It should be intentional, but but it brings me to the point, like you made a good point about like how you're measuring and like revenue, but what are some key metrics that you can look at to know that the brand is working, or that these strategies are actually working and that they can be fruitful outside of, obviously revenue?
I think if you see the community engage,
And what does that look like?
I mean, it can take on a variety of shapes. I'm thinking, there's one group that we manage. Part of their brand is it's like they're very it's like almost like Gen Z circus themed. That when they perform, they have this face paint that they wear, and so makeup is a big part of our brand umbrella. And we see kids come early wearing the makeup. We actually installed a makeup station on our current tour. Kids can pay to have their makeup done. So when you see kids engage in that way or talk about those things online, I think that's a pretty good sign that it's working.
Awesome.
Online on the social side, very similar with the community engagement. And one of the things I track the most are comments, and especially on TikTok, like the comment section is the huge thing. You know how people are reacting to your video, to your content, to your brand based on the comments. So you can get a pretty good understanding off of that. And then also seeing how much are my videos being shared, how many engagements am I getting. But I really love the comment section.
Yeah, I would definitely say those. And anyone who looks at streaming numbers, monthly listeners is definitely not a good indication of popularity or or any sort of branding. I think if you were to look at any metrics on Spotify, it's definitely followers and conversions from songs that you put out to people who indicate that they want to hear more. And then yeah, I mean, and then there's the whole engagement element that exists on streaming platforms, which I think is like how many times someone is listening to a certain song. That could really just mean like I really like the song, but the likeliness of someone, if they're streaming, if like the average streams per listener on a song is like 6, which is extremely high, and you don't have a strong artist brand on like that's covered on your socials that's promoting that song and connecting to that song, you're losing an opportunity for those people who clearly like the song to follow across other channels to be like kind of primed for when you put out more music. So in terms of building a fan base, it is all very connected, and like knowing what to look out for.
Awesome. Retweet and sharing. Brooke is the GOAT. I'm looking at comments.
I was just remembering real quick from your earlier. I was thinking about like interesting brand partnerships that I had worked on, and one that stuck out as I was kind of thinking about them was Weezer has always made their albums base their albums around like a color. So their first album was the blue album, like the green album, red album, white album, black album. I had the pleasure of working on many. And we always found really great brand partners for each color, just like things that were naturally like one color. I remember when we did the black album, we partnered with Sharpie, because like Sharpies are just, and we made Weezer Sharpies, and that was a major label artist. But then thinking about on the developing artist side, we had an unsigned artist whose single was called Bad Haircut, and although we couldn't get like a monetary partner, we ended up just having a good faith partnership with Locks of Love, who were a promotional partner for us. And
yeah, I love that. So as we are in an increasingly more digital world, I do love that artists' music is still, like, you still need to have those in real life, or those experiences that you're bringing people together. And so when you're looking at, for example, concerts where people are dressing up in the different eras. Like, I think it's so, like, especially with Taylor Swift and Beyonce recently, right? Like, these are huge blockbuster stadium tours, and it's becoming these moments that people are doing together. Like, we're getting outside of our house and from in front of screens and dressing up. And I think that Taylor Swift helped. You mentioned GDP earlier, Will, and I actually think that Taylor Swift's concert is helping GDP in certain areas because of how strong her brand is and the fact that she's connected with fans and just continuously is just so intentional and very consistent with what she's doing. And then even looking at Beyonce, like, Renaissance was a moment. It's a different moment or a different era for the artist herself, but everyone just kind of tacked on to this Renaissance moment for her. So I just think those two are very interesting to call out because they take their music, which is we are consuming now in a digital space, but they're able to still build these blockbuster stadiums. So it gives me hope for future artists as well. But what happens when you're not aligned with the brand? So, like, as we work in the industry, so we work with artists, and as fans, I know sometimes there may not be alignment with who you work with and who you listen to, but what are you looking for on the professional side when you're looking to work with artists, and their brands are intact and whatnot? Like, where can things, like, how do you handle misalignment in the branding? Do you just not take them on as a client, or do you try to pitch them in ways to help evolve their brand, or like, how does that work for you? Have you ever had those experiences?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to speak in too much detail, but yeah, it's hard, and I think that's kind of how we started the conversation of artists having not only knowing who they are and who they want their fans to know them as, but having like unwavering conviction around that. And it's honestly not easy to find. And a lot of artists think that, they're really talented and make the music and write great songs and put it out, and that's kind of it. And the record label and managers and the whole team that they have around them is kind of supposed to do the rest. And I'm not talking about getting on TikTok and like doing the content work, but part of that, driving your own ship and being the CEO of your own brand for the artist, is not giving up on who you are. And so I think that's where a lot of misalignment stems from, is the kind of sit back and wait for the brand to build itself. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the old days, that was the job of the label and an A&R and marketing. And so there's very much a disconnect of people who still think that that's how it works. And I think there's never an easy way to handle that, but I think it's not deciding what their brand is for them or telling them that there's misalignment. It's guiding them to find it themselves, which takes a lot of hand-holding. So if anyone is aspiring to be a manager, best of luck.
I don't suggest it.
Yeah. Anyone else want to answer on the, like, how do you handle situations where the brand is misaligned or what the artist's vision has is not resonating?
I think to answer your earlier question, on sometimes it means that we might not take on a client just because, like, it's not worth the work if they really don't have it figured out. Like, I mentioned earlier, like, a situation I think we're all familiar with where someone or something pops off and they don't really have it together. They don't understand who they are as an artist yet. Maybe it's not their fault. Maybe they're in high school. Maybe they're still in college. Maybe they're still figuring it out. But yeah, maybe in that case, we don't take on that client because what's going to happen is there's going to be a quick bidding war over one song. It's going to go to a label for 6 months and it's never going to be heard from again. And it's just not for a manager or businesses like Blair, Brooke, and I run. It's just it can't be part of our business. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And so I've come from businesses where I have had to, like, I didn't really have a choice. And the way that the teams have kind of handled it is usually there should be like a process in place of who's communicating with the artists, or, just trying to avoid any hurting anyone's feelings or creating a bad experience or hurting the relationship, because I think so much of what we do in music is relationship built. So I think it is really important to find that alignment, and like you said, Brooke, like guiding them, giving them the data points, making sure that they see the comments or whatever it is, and not hiding those things from them. And then from there, having to make some tough decisions if you have to. But I've been in some situations myself where either from management, I've had to turn clients down, you kind of have to go through the motions of saying, well, we told you so, unless there's something, of course, detrimental to the brand that I was then representing. And so we have a little bit of time where I want to ask one last question and get into some Q&A from the audience. But I wanted to know, what are some career paths or skills that are important for supporting artists and like helping them to either build their brands or to further their brands?
On the marketing side, when it comes to marketing or social media marketing, there are so many different ways to go about it. You can be at a major label, you can be at a management company, you can be at an independent, those spaces in there. And then with that, there's graphic design, the actual social media account manager, project managers that help get from A to B to C. There's a lot of different roles within that. If you want to touch on the others.
Role with management, like how does someone get from, like, do you have to go, are there courses you can take, or are there certain skills that you have to have on the management side?
Well, you want to go first?
There are certainly things you can do to be better at dealing with artists. I don't often go around bragging about my emotional intelligence or soft skills. We're all good at some things. So I'm probably not the best person to ask. Brooke, throwing it to you.
Okay.
I'm gonna quote my former boss, who convinced me to go into management. He was a very successful manager, and he told me that to be a manager, you don't have to. Because when he asked me, I told him I've never done management. I don't know how to do this, and he said all of that can be learned, but what you can't teach and you have to have is passion. If you're passionate enough about not just music and the artist, but the industry truly, and all the different facets of it, and you as a manager have enough conviction around your artists and their future hopeful success, that is the biggest skill and most important skill you can have, because that is what will drive you. The soft skills.
The soft skills that Will doesn't want to tell us about. His IP. But no, I think, yeah, absolutely. And there's so many things, like this umbrella of the artist brand is going to determine so many pieces of it, right? So whether you're looking at finance, you got to find someone that understands, okay, like this is how we're going to make money, the contracting and the legal side of things. So there's so many ways that actually touches the brand, or at least you're going to be supporting or reinforcing it in a way that is going to protect the artist. But then there's the actual creation and like the actual implementation of the branding. Are there any other advice? Is there advice that you would have for our audience today, whether they're, just, I think the ages for everyone is like 16 to 24 is what's marketed. But if you're young in your career or haven't really started yet, like what advice do you have? Or is there a book recommendation that you want to give to the audience?
I would start by saying that it's a very complex industry and there's like a million different pieces. And so it's okay if you don't know which piece is kind of calling to you, and where your skill set may lie, or kind of what it is in the industry you want to do. I certainly have had many different roles at many different companies and worn many different hats, and all of them have snowballed into the next opportunity, and widened my experiences, and most importantly, my relationships. I think Will actually was the first person I met in the music industry. And I think your network, and not just upward, but horizontally, is probably the most important thing you can have in the music industry, especially when you're young. And so meeting as many people as possible. You never know when you're going to work with them or for them. But also just building genuine relationships, I think is the best advice I can give, and just learning about what everyone does, and it will work itself out.
Only because you specifically mentioned it, everyone should be reading all the time. There's so many good books out there that, I mean, man, I feel like I feel like there's not enough time to read all the books I want to read. Hitman.
Yep, Hitman is.
Where Are Your Boys Tonight? Your Brain on Music. The Operator.
Yeah.
Soundtrack of My Life. There you go. Take those.
Yeah. Awesome.
My advice would be just make the most of any opportunities that come your way. And as you grow and start to get more opportunities in the music industry, still stay humble and stay hungry for it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm looking at the Q&A, and there's a couple of questions. Some of them we've touched on. A lot of them are on social engagement. And I think we've touched a lot on that. But there was an interesting question in here about, someone is currently developing a new social media strategy for TikTok artists. How do you go about rebranding an artist profile to increase engagement? So you want to take that one on?
I wish I knew.
I know. I wish we all knew.
I can dive into that. So I think with TikTok, really figuring out what your message is and what you want to deliver to the audience, because TikTok's all about consistency and the algorithm. So you need to have some form of message and brand that you're getting out there. So I think it's important to look at different creators and see what is working and the types of content that you like putting out. So if you're an artist and you're comfortable making videos, singing in the car, and you're down for that, then that can be a lane that you start developing content in that road. But if you aren't interested in that type of content, but you have a funny personality and want to talk on TikTok, finding content in that lane and then making sure you build out your content strategy based on that, but just really finding the types of creators that you like their content and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and how to align it to yourself so that you can pump out that content consistently and organically.
And with TikTok, it's a lot of testing, right? Like, and I think with social in general, I always try to remind people that usually they're seeing your content in snippets, and unless you can bring them in with that one snippet, they're not seeing everything as a whole. So it's always cool to test and track and just continuously, like you said, go back, check the comments, and you just have to be very active with it.
Yes, and even if it's not going viral, just not giving up. I had an artist who posted for a year on TikTok. She had about 1,000 followers, and then one video hit, and within a month, she had over 800,000 followers, and a major label deal. So just making sure you don't give up, because it really is testing.
Yeah. And before I leave, does anyone have any last things that they want to say to the audience, or words of wisdom as we depart?
I like leaving it on stay humble and stay hungry.
Yeah. I was going to say stay ready so you don't have to get ready, right? So start to get those questionnaires together about like what you want to learn from your artists, what brands they might, even if you're a fan and you just want to start to think about like, who do I like, who do I listen to, and why? Like, why do I resonate with those people? That can really start to help you with building out what is branding and how can I contribute to that. So thank you all for joining us.